Alright, we're getting pretty close to the end here on this series, guys. The blades are built at this point and operational. I've done one last QC of going over and looking at each of my solder joints up close. I've gone back in and added some thin CA around these joints just to make sure that the wick's in there and everything's going to hold in place. I even went as far as on this set to go ahead and put a drop of CA on the leading edges to help just hold those in place. And once we shoot with the clear coat, that should do, but I'm just taking a little extra step. One note of caution, I did go ahead and wet sand these with 600 grit again. When you are wet sanding, when you come over your LEDs, be very gentle because you can damage the LEDs, as I did on the red ones on this set of blades. So I had to actually replace both of them because apparently I skimmed the top of the LED right off with the 600 grit, so that layer is not that thick on the LED, so it doesn't have much room. But anyway, they're wet sanded, cleaned off with some rubbing alcohol and a fresh paper towel, trying to keep my oily mitts off of them as much as possible, and ready to shoot clear coat. Alright, we're getting ready to mix up our clear coat. So I've got my 1 gallon for my 1 ounce of what I need. And I've also got my my hardener. What I've done, I've gone ahead and poured a little bit into an old applesauce cup. So there's my clear, here's my hardener. Bring our scale back into the picture here. This is a 4-to-1 ratio. I know this isn't exact to the molecular weight, but it's close enough for racing. So I've got my scale. I'm going to mix up a little over an ounce, and an ounce is 28.35 grams. So we're going to zero this. Here comes my clear. Careful, don't touch the sides. Alright, so 29. That's 25% of 30. What, 7.5? So let's add about 8 or 9 grams here. So 29, let's shoot for 37, 38. And a drop to grow on. There we go. Mixing your clear. Got your popsicle stick, swirl it around. Okay, it's time to say goodbye to this set of blades. Do a quick recap on this. First thing to be careful of doing night blades with carbon fiber blades is that where the two halves of the blade clamshell together, you typically have an exposed piece of carbon fiber along the leading edge. That will short out between these traces when the battery switch is turned on, or when the battery is applied. So it basically, not only do you have the load of the LEDs on the blade, or on the battery, but you also have the carbon fiber shorting across. So it tends to give you really low run times. So how we got around that? We applied a little bit of clear coat to the leading edge before we put these copper traces over there to isolate them. Next thing after that is you're going to wet sand the entire blade again, because you're going to be laying up your components. You're going to be pressing those in place. You're going to measure once, twice, 3 times instead of redoing things. Once you have your components, your copper foil laid in place, you're going to solder your LEDs / resistor combos onto the blade. You're going to lay up your traces. You're going to test it. Then you'll move in towards the root side of the blade. You'll end up cutting off your excess at this end of it, because you've got your switch and your charger receptacle mounted, and that's going to dictate where those leads go to. Then you're going to mount your battery, and with double-sided servo tape, you'll secure that with a piece of heat shrink. The other thing that goes inside here is where the jumpers are, going from the charge receptacle to the positive terminal of the battery to the positive trace on the lead, you're going to solder in some jumpers, being pieces of wire. And we've used hot glue to secure the whole thing. And once all was said and done, we put back in the paint booth and we shot a nice wet coat of clear onto it. So all of these components are basically held in place with the addition of some CA around the solder joints around the LEDs, but largely in part by the clear coat. And the clear coat will keep the nitro fuel exhaust from getting underneath the copper into the adhesive, and then therefore allowing the copper traces to come up over time. These blades have been test flown this afternoon. They flew just fine. We'll show you one last number with the scale. You'll recall these blades did not match weights at the initial. Their CGs were close, but they were probably off by about 2 millimeters. They're probably within half a millimeter now. Blade number 1 going in. .144.89. What do you know? Match set. One thing to note on these blades is I got to be completely intimate over all the viewing, is these two blades were not the exact same length from bolt hole to tip. One blade was actually about a millimeter shorter than the other. Must say, I've never paid this much attention to a set of blades. Don't know how consistent or inconsistent that sort of reality is across our rotor blades, but the big thing is when you're balancing your blades is as long as your blades balance typically under the old mechanical balancer, so that means that the mass times the moment arm is correct, which basically all boils down to your CG. As long as the CGs are close and the weights are close at that point, you're not going to get too much vibration out of the rotor head. And we're talking millimeters and hundredths of a gram, and that yields to forces of when the blades are operating in the range of maybe a half a pound to a pound relative to, say, 350 pounds of force or more. So having one blade at 349 pounds of force and one at 350, not going to cause a huge vibration to show up through the helicopter. But if you're going to be able to fine-tune a blade, it's worthwhile paying attention to, and try and do your best to do what you can. Go over the charge leads real quick. It's just a set of banana plugs that you can get at your local electronics shop. Then I bring that into a piece of security wire, which is a 22 gauge 4-conductor, and then I solder on a couple of servo ends on this, or servo plugs. And you'll notice what I've done is I went ahead and used all 3 pins, even though we only need 2. The reason being is, like I said, I've made these modeled after the MS composite charger. Idea being you could use the MS composite charger if you already have one. The other thing is it's a nice design in that we're only using the outside and the center pin. So if I inadvertently flip this over and try to charge it, this 3rd pin isn't doing anything. The positive is still the positive, so I have a no connection here. So I'm not going to harm anything. If I had made the first pin, say, the negative, and the last pin the positive, if I were to flip this over, I could be in a dead short situation against the other blade, and there go blow up my light post. So just a little point to consider there.